2nd of August, and yet again we come back to this emotive place, which is Summerland. Tina is with us, campaigning for many, many years to get something done here, along with other people, but you have got your own thoughts on it. And I don't know, I take shots of this every year and it looks exactly the same. It's not going to just fall down, is it, the old place?
No, well, it hasn't changed since the demolition, really. No. So I don't know really what it'll take to make it change. I've campaigned with various heads of DOI who've been very on board with a memorial, and I'm hopeful that Lawrence Skelly will also take it forward. I had a meeting a couple of weeks ago and he seemed quite taken with what we had planned, so it's just a case of waiting now and see what they come up with. What
do you want to see on this land? I know you want the memorial, but what else do you think is fitting for this area?
I want something for the people, and I'm not talking another leisure centre because that ship has sailed. We haven't got the tourist industry to sustain it, and there's no business plan which would support it. But I think it could lend itself very well to cultural events, and I'm thinking in particular the likes of the Lorient Festival, which they attract, I think it's 800,000 visitors each year. I think we could do something like that to attract visitors and also attract locals, and make it into a cultural event.
Well, you've got the pipes there warming up in a minute. It's very emotive. Also, I'd like to see the faces that come back here time and time again. Yeah. Must get a bit hi to Ruth, who's in Northern Ireland. She couldn't make it this year. She hasn't been well, and I think as time goes on, people have that problem, don't they, to get here?
I think particularly this year there's quite a few that haven't been able to make it over, who do come over to remember their friends and families who were killed in the fire. It's very emotional for them, and it's a very, very emotional event for all of us as well, when they reminisce, and they never forget their friends and families who were killed here. And it's almost like we're a family now, our Summerland family.
Well, you've got a 2-minute silence coming up, which you organised, then you're going to make a little bit of a speech, so we're going to play that out as well for people who can't be here today. And do you think one day in our lifetime we will finally see this over?
Do you know what, Paul? I would love one day if instead of laying a wreath on the tarmac of a car park, that we actually have a proper fitting memorial that we can put a wreath down and remember the 50 victims of this huge tragedy which resonated around the world. It's not just a local event. People all over the world remember what happened here, and they were just as shocked as we were. Usually at this point I welcome our visitors from further afield who travel over to remember their friends and families, but the present lockdown has probably prevented many from joining us this year. Once again, we have a commemoration book circulating, and I hope you'll all take time to sign it. So welcome everyone as we gather here to mark the 47th anniversary of the Summerland fire. And who could have imagined when we left here last year the way the world would have turned? Things that we took for granted, we now realise the importance of the part they play in our lives. Our health, our families, friends, enjoying our countryside and beaches, and our freedom. These past months have been a wake-up call for many, and not just here on our little island. Over the years since the fire, I've wondered, if the unthinkable should happen and once again we should be tested to the degree we were back then, would our island community respond in the same way as we did 47 years ago? We all know the answer to this is a resounding yes. Like then, our emergency services and NHS have given unstintingly of their time and expertise. Over these months, I've heard our elected representatives say we're in unprecedented times. Well, that's not entirely true. 47 years ago, we were in unprecedented times. There was no lead up. There was very little in the way of planning that we could draw on for such a crisis. Yet, like now, our island people acted instinctively and with compassion in so many ways. People tell me of how they stood for hours at the Old Nobles Hospital in case they needed to give blood, of how hotel and boarding house keepers opened their doors to families and friends of the victims and injured. Taxi drivers ferried those in need to hospital without charge. There was a Navy vessel in Douglas Harbour that gave Nobles the support of its medical team. The government, council, Trust House 40 and the public gave donations to the disaster fund. We all stood together in what was a very dark time. They say out of every darkness there comes light. Out of the dark times surrounding the Summerland fire, and more recently in the current crisis, surely the light is the way our island acts with unfailing compassion in giving instinctively in whatever way we can, no matter how small, in what was then, like now, unprecedented times. The lessons learned and legislation put in place after the fire meant that we and our families are now safe, at least in any public building on the island. That's the legacy left to us by the 50 men, women and children killed here. And we must never forget that legacy, but ensure that our elected representatives continue to maintain that legislation in place and provide proper funding for our emergency services ongoing. We've seen over the recent years in the UK the tragic consequences if authorities fail to do that. So to all those killed and injured here, we honour you and remember you. To all those injured mentally and physically, we honour you and remember you. To all of those who helped here on that night, we honour you and remember you. And to all those who assisted in the aftermath, we honour you and remember you. The debt we owe you can never be repaid, but it will never be forgotten. On this site, at this time 47 years ago, there was a young police constable, Richard Davis, dealing with the aftermath. And I'm glad to say he's now here to lay our flowers in remembrance, followed by our 1 minute silence. Is that lovely?
Very nice.